Everybody, this is Dr. Flight. Hope you're doing fantastic today. I have a short little video here. This is part of a series of videos on choosing market segments, defining the market segment attractiveness, and then choosing a strategy to go forward with. So this extends another video where we talked about the idea of scope and how the scope of the market is defined when you choose an entry strategy for whether you are going to approach the market as one big whole unit, or if you're going to break it up through segmenting and then pick and choose specific market segments that you will then position yourself towards. And so by and large, we talk about this idea here where you can kind of look from left to right and then see these different strategies that you're probably familiar with. You've probably heard these terms before: mass market, large segment, adjacent or multi-segment marketing, small segments, and then niche marketing or niche segment strategies. So what happens here is we've got segments that fall within these categories. Like in this case, we have a mass market approach where we look to serve everybody in the market universally. A large segment approach where in this case there's segment A. Now segment A is large, and you could subdivide A a little bit up into other smaller sub segments, I guess is the way you'd say that. Or you can consolidate them, treat them as a whole. But then you kind of move on and you've got, well, maybe I don't want to just serve A. A is a big segment, but maybe I want to serve A and maybe a segment that's close to them or similar to them, like B, and I could approach both segments. Now I'm going to have to design unique marketing programs, one for A and one for B, but I could do that. And so that's kind of the idea here when we start thinking about reaching one segment A, or reaching more than one segment A and B. Those are strategies that you want to consider or want to think about doing. Okay, so another way to look at this is just another image here. The first image, first pie here, undifferentiated marketing. That is strictly when we look at doing something that would be like mass marketing, where we treat everybody the same. One product or one value proposition is generated, and it's meant to serve everyone in the market. And then we have others. Differentiated marketing in the strictest sense means that we're going to create differentiations among customers, which we do when we segment. Each segment gets its own value proposition, its own marketing plan, its own unique sales pitch, its own product. And this might be something where you have one type of product and then you make lots of versions of it. Each version is intended for a different group of consumers. And so that would be differentiated marketing. And the other extreme version then is concentrated marketing, when we start still looking at segments, where instead of multiple segments, we look at one, and we look to serve that one extremely well. This might be a small market strategy or a niche strategy. Those are the terms that you'd use in this particular case. So again, this is just another example, another illustration, so to help you feel comfortable affirming these things that you're sort of learning about. So this large market segment, it's generally this idea that the large segment has a majority of the customers in it. But most of those customers behave and function very similar to each other, and it sort of excludes the outlying customers who are going to be really hard to reach or have unique needs that your company can't deliver on. But by and large, you can deliver on most of the customers, and they would fall into this group. So one core market need is generally focused on by the firm. That one need is what is the market generally will coalesce around. And kind of like a mass marketing appeal, Efficiencies of scale are gained because, again, while we're not trying to serve everybody in the market, we are trying to serve a lion's share of the market and find one common theme that everyone in that one large segment is driven by or motivated by that we can deliver on, of course. Right. So this is like one step down from mass marketing. Again, we're looking for a core group of consumers who have a single need that we deliver on well, but that transcends minor issues, minor things like that. I mean, if I'm trying to sell a car, maybe people are looking for a car versus a truck, versus a motorcycle or something like that. So I sell a car. Now I'm not going to attract the SUV and the truck buyers. I'm not going to attract them. I'm going to attract the buyers who want a car. Now, is it really important like what color the car is or how much horsepower it has or whether it has 6 cup holders or 4 cup holders? Those are all things that are features and people think about, but that doesn't matter if the color of the car is what you like. They're not going to go buy a truck. They're going to buy a car, right? I mean, if you didn't have their color, they're not going to go buy a truck. They're going to go buy the car. So in other words, get it right on the one thing that everybody agrees on, and you'll win a lot of the market that way. And that's kind of the idea of a large market segment strategy. Now, the other options that fall in between here are a single market approach or a multi-market approach. Okay, so when we're talking about smaller market segments, this is going away from a large market segment, but going to a smaller one, and in single market segments, the customers are generally similar to each other, right? There's a lack of difference between the customers. And again, it's on those nuanced things. The smaller that market size gets, they get more particular on certain items, right? So whereas before we had car drivers or car buyers, maybe car buyers who want a 6-cylinder engine because they need a little bit more power. Okay, that's a more specific group, but by default, it's also going to be a smaller group as well. And if the engine that you produce is 6-cylinder and it's not 8, it's not 4, then that's what would be most appealing to that group of consumers. Now, would other people buy that 6-cylinder engine? Yeah, probably, but the ones who really want it will buy your car because you have that thing to offer, that one feature that they want. So again, the more focused we get with the features and the benefits and things that we're delivering, the smaller the market's going to be, the smaller the size of the market will be. We had some positioning errors that we talked about in other videos. A positioning error is when there's a couple different ways it can happen, but the two that are impactful here is if you try to, if you don't define your benefits well enough, then no one will really think your product is for them. That's called under positioning, when you don't create a distinctive advantage and don't demonstrate how the product specifically designed for this market segment. That's under positioning. When you over position, it's when you make your product too well defined that it only reaches a very, very small group of consumers. So if I call myself a car company with a 6-cylinder engine that makes red cars with only leather interior and 2 cup holders, that's a real narrow space, right? If that's what I do and that's where I'm positioning myself, then I'm only going to attract customers who want a car, a 6-cylinder, leather interior, red with 2 cup holders. That will be the market that I reach, and it's probably going to be too small. That's called over positioning, right? When you have too much of a focus, then your market becomes too small. So this single market approach is really kind of a unique. It's one of these where you could say this is a niche approach, but the only distinction is the niche may be larger, the segment might be larger and large enough, where a niche might be smaller volume wise, but you're still, catering to a need, but not over catering, I guess is the key thing to think about there. Okay, another approach then is if you take several of these smaller segments and target them individually. Okay, so this is kind of what we want to do. You want to, or this is one strategy of how to think about this. Let's say we're doing well in one market segment, but we need to grow. So we find another market segment that we can adequately serve, and we begin serving them with a new marketing plan and a new approach. So we have two separate. Now, do these market segments need to be conceptually close to each other? Not necessarily. If they are close to each other, we call that an adjacent segment, because they're close to each other, but they're distinctly different. But they could be not necessarily very close to each other. They could be different from each other, as long as we have the capability to satisfy them and create a unique sales proposition. Then that would work. Okay, so that's kind of this idea of the multi-segment strategy, and I mentioned this term adjacent strategies, right? So when we look at the adjacent strategy, then again, it's like once that market segment is defined, inevitably there'll be another market segment that could be close to it, and they could even overlap a little bit. Right, so two market segments that overlap a little bit would be prime targets for a multi-segment scheme with adjacent markets. I'm still creating two different marketing plans, one for segment one for segment two, but conceptually these segments are really, really close to each other. They're co-joined, if you will. Maybe in the beverage industry, you have people who drink soda, people who drink water, people who drink energy drinks, and things like that. People who drink sports drinks, people who drink alcoholic beverages, which might include beers and seltzers. And you could see how, if I'm a beer producer, I could have a line of products that relate to beer. But if I also started doing a cider seltzer, or a cider beer of some type, or a cider, which is really a different product. You've got the cider drinkers, and then you've got the beer drinkers, but they overlap each other a bit. And they are maybe hard to distinguish and separate apart. They're really close to each other conceptually. So it might make sense for me to target both segments simultaneously, using a different product, obviously, and a different approach to reach them and such. But it's not that much of a stretch to say you're going to serve those two. If you're that beer producer and you start making a sports drink, that's pretty far away, right? That's a different market. That's a different type of consumer. Even though they're all drinking beverages, it'd be really hard to do a multi-segment approach with those two segments. It doesn't make sense to do that, right? Or choose those two. So adjacent segments then would be segments that are closer to each other in nature. As an illustration, here's another car example with Toyota. Over the years, from, believe it or not, the 1950s, the Corona, which then led to the Corolla, and then the Celica, the Supra, what a great car. And of course the Camry has been an amazing vehicle for many years, since '82, if you can believe it. So over 40 years the Camry has been around, and it's been a great car for them. But you can kind of see how when you move from one small car to another small car to a sporty car to a real sporty car in the Supra, and then to more of a mid-sized sedan in the Camry, still with sporty features though, but a little bit bigger in size than the Celica or Corolla. You can kind of see how the Toyota is using new product innovations and new product launches to capture markets that are very close to each other, and then further on. Now, Toyota eventually launched a truck, which would not be adjacent, right? The adjacency of the truck market and the small mid-sized car market is not close to each other. Now, also look further on when we have the Lexus and the Avalon, the Prius. We've got different varieties coming out later on, and they vary in quality and price and such, and kind of what they do. Okay, but the whole point here is to identify groups of consumers that are conceptually close to each other, because it makes sense for you to kind of use, if you're going to do a multi-segment approach, to join those together. Think of them as units, and then attack them as you would. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is wrap up with a couple more illustrations, and these are just some more visualizations on how you can think about some of these strategies. We've done this idea of like the large segment strategy. So here's a large segment strategy, and one of the ideas is if we're going to concentrate products into one single segment, but we're going to do our best to serve that segment well. So this is an illustration. The alpha, beta, gamma up there in the blue boxes are products. So we have 3 different products, all, and we could have a product line here, if you will. Sometimes we call this a depth strategy. That's just another term that could be used for this in particular type of strategy, where we want to go very deep in a single market segment. Again, you're going to know this market segment extremely well. It's going to be one that you are familiar with, they're familiar with you, but it's going to be large. It's going to be a significantly sized segment. Okay. Another strategy then, again, kind of continuing on with this might be one of those adjacent strategies where we have the product that we offer, but if you see here, there's a lot of overlap between D and E. And maybe even C for a stretch there, or maybe you have another product that goes for A, B, and C together, because look at the overlap that's there. Those are overlapping market segments, and there may be times when it's hard to distinguish the two from each other. And it is not a stretch for you to say, well, I'm going to go from one to the other, or one kind of have two strategies going on simultaneously. Now, in this particular case, a breadth strategy, that terminology refers to this idea of how you're using your products. So if you put your same products in multiple markets, that's also called a market development strategy. If you think about Ansoff's growth matrix, so that would be that form of this adjacency model. Again, these are different markets, but they're so closely connected that it kind of makes sense to do a breadth strategy, maybe something like that. And again, we're looking at the adjacency of the segments more than anything else. Okay, and then the very last thing is when we do a tailored strategy. So again, when we look at this tailored strategy piece, we are purely creating new market programs for each of the different segments, even though they're closely related. We're changing it up for each individual one. Now, one of the benefits of this is you could choose another market segment like A, and you could approach A using a tailored strategy. You don't have to have adjacency, in other words, for this type of strategy. And that's not really depicted particularly well, but the key here is if you're creating a new marketing plan, new product, a new approach, a new positioning statement, then it could be wholly redesigned specifically for a very different market segment if that's what you had in mind or wanted to choose to do. Okay, so again, this video has been just a recap, I guess, or just kind of a conversation about this multi-strategy or multi-market segment strategy approach to scope and how you're going to bring products to the market. This is more common. So there's the mass market approach, and there's one-to-one, but there's and niche. But there's also the strategy where you can pick and choose numbers of segments and choose which ones are the most appropriate ones closest to you and such, or closer to each other, are appropriate. And then whether you're going to redesign marketing plans for each individual one, or you're going to try to reuse your marketing plan and create more efficiency by using the same one in multiple segments. Okay, so thanks again for listening. I'm glad you were able to catch this video. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you're doing great.